Okay, so before we get started, we're going to start testing a claim about a proportion value. Remember that the p-value of a sample is just the probability that this sample occurs based on an assumption that the null hypothesis is really true. So the claim is a drug manufacturer claims that over 70% of those who took a drug experienced joint relief pain. To test this claim, we survey a simple random sample of 700 people who had joint relief pain. And 497 of those who tried the drug experienced relief. We will use a significance level of 0.05 to test the claim. So just like we did in a few videos ago, let's try our first step here is going to be setting up the null and alternative hypothesis and marking which one's the claim. We're working with proportions here because you can see the claim is, and I'm going to actually highlight this here, the claim is that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief. You can see we're working with proportions here. Remember, the null hypothesis is always going to be an equal value, so p is equal to 0.70. But that wasn't the claim. You can see in the claim it says over 70%. So that would be p greater than 0.70, and this one is the claim value. Now, I'm going to scroll back up and take a look. Since our claim is H1, in the last video I referenced this, but since our claim was H1, then we're going to be kind of operating, and I'm going to refer to this diagram later, we're going to be operating here. So at the end, our conclusion is going to be either the sample data supports the claim that over 70% of people experience relief, or there is not sufficient sample evidence to support the claim that over 70% of people experience relief after taking the drug. So you can see we're going to kind of fall into one of those two categories. So back down to the notes. Because the claim is H1, we will either support or fail to support this claim. If our sample has a low probability of occurring, a small p-value, then we will reject H0 and support H1. If our p-value is large, then we will fail to reject. So does the research support this claim? Does getting 497 out of 700 people experience relief support the claim that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief? We need to choose a significance level. We're going to use 5%. Remember, we always work with things in a decimal format, so this would be 0.05. Again, we're going to follow the step where we assume that it is 70%. So we're going to just, I know it seems kind of crazy to do this, but to do a hypothesis test, you assume that the proportion of people who experience relief is 70%. Then what we do is, based off of that, we find the probability of getting these results that we had right here. So, remember, this says remember from the previous page. If you guys are taking the notes, you know that we're going to just go ahead and recopy the null and alternative. So the null hypothesis was equal to 0.70, which I'm assuming, and then our alternative is that, whoops, p is greater than 0.70. So actually, real quick, let's mark this as our claim just to be sure. So also our sample was 700 and 497 said they experienced relief. So we need to know the proportion of our sample who experienced relief. That is, what percent of those in our sample experienced relief. Remember, it's the number of successes divided by the sample size. That is x divided by n. And we know that n is 700 and x is 497. So 497 over 700 is 497 over 700 is 0.71, so about 71% experienced relief. This is where I want to stop and think for a second. And again, I know this takes a little bit, but just look. What did we claim here? We claimed that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief. What percent did we get in our sample? We got 71%. Is this data strong enough to claim that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief. I like to say that this doesn't pass the smell test. For you to, it's really hard to claim that it's over 70% when you're just 1% over. I'm not sure that this data is going to be strong enough for us to support the claim. I think this is going to show us, and we're going to walk through that process now. So our sample proportion is 0.71. Again, it's just nice to go back and look, compare the claim with your data and see, just basically, is it strong enough? Do you think it's going to be strong enough? I think no, but we'll see in a second. Our sample size is 700, and our significance level is 0.05. We're going to put this data into Microsoft Excel. So when you're in your Excel tab, you're going to click over for a little bit, and you're going to find hypothesis testing proportions. So we're going to put our null and alternative hypothesis here. 0.70, p is equal to 0.70, and then 0.70. It's the same thing in the null and alternative, but we need to change this from less than to greater than. And now we're going to go down here. Our sample proportion was 0.71, our sample size was 700, and our significance level was 0.05. Now I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Let's zoom out a little bit more and take a look. What we really need is we need our p-value and we need our z-score test statistic. So our z-test statistic is 0.5774. And our p-value was 0.2819. I'll round this 4 decimals places. You want to take the p-value out 4 decimals places. Okay, based off this p-value, what that is remember that it basically, if we assume that the probability is 70%, the likelihood of getting these results is about 28.19% of the time. What does that mean? Here we're going to go ahead and take a look at that flow chart. So let's compare our p-value, 0.2819, to our alpha or significance level of 0.05. Clearly here, p is greater than our alpha value. So p is greater than alpha. And now I want to take a second to go back to this chart. You can see I have this chart over here. Remember what I said before is we're going to be operating down here since H1 was our claim. So was p less than alpha or was p greater than alpha? P was greater than alpha, so we are going to say we fail to reject the null hypothesis. So we fail to reject the null hypothesis. So since our original claim was H1, again, nice to go over here and take a look. You can't use this for tests or quizzes, but while you're getting used to it, this is how we're going to state our claim. We're going to say there's not sufficient sample evidence to support the claim that, and then we need to write the claim. So we will say there is not sufficient sample evidence to support the claim that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief. Again, it just goes back to that initial point of we said that over 70% of those who took the drug experienced relief. In our case, it was only 71% from our sample data, and that's just not strong enough to make the claim. We're going to see in the next video the data is going to be a little bit stronger, and we might be in the situation where we can support that claim.